Well, good morning, everybody. I think we'll get started. It's 10 o'clock. We may have a few people continuing to join us, but I'm really delighted to have you join our first Reduce the Risk Fall webinar. This is the first session in a series of 4 that will be held during the month of November, which is actually Fall Prevention Month. I'm Nancy Edwards. I'm a board member with the CARP Ottawa Chapter, and I'm also the chair for a Fall Prevention Advocacy Working Group that has been set up by our board. I have a long-standing interest in falls and their prevention. We're delighted that the Ottawa chapter of CARP is sponsoring this event. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Aboriginal territory where our CARP Ottawa chapter is based. We recognize that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, and we extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Perhaps I'll just start briefly with why we're doing this series. Well, as I mentioned, it is Fall Prevention Month, and we know that falls are common and costly. A lot of us think of falls as being an issue with seniors, and we know that the rate and incidence of falls increases as you get older, but falls are a concern for all age groups. 1 in 3 seniors fall every year, and serious falls can land you in hospital and have long-term consequences. We know that most seniors want to age in place, so we have that in mind, as we planned our various sessions. And we can't prevent all falls, but we certainly can prevent a lot of falls, and that's what we're aiming for. We hope the series is going to give you some ideas about how to proactively prevent falls. Just to give you a sense of the structure, and then I'll provide some housekeeping. We're going to start with our speakers, and I've got lots of questions for them, and I'll introduce them in a few minutes. And then we'll follow that with hopefully a 10 to 15 minute session for your questions, and I'll tell you where you can post those in just a moment. I'm just going to toggle out of this give me a second here. So housekeeping, all of the attendees, you are muted and we can't actually see you, but I can see a list of attendees, so I know that you're there. Some of you have joined by phone, most have joined on the internet. For those who have joined on the internet, you can use the Q&A icon, which is right at the bottom of your screen and in the middle of it. If you move your cursor down, you'll see it. And you can open that up and type in your question for the speakers. And I encourage you to post your questions as you think of them. And we have somebody working behind the scenes who I'll introduce later, Bonnie, to collate your questions, and she'll be asking them of the speakers when we get to that part of the session. You can use the chat function, which you'll also see at the bottom of your screen, for other questions or comments that you may have that are not specific to this topic. If you're joining by phone, you won't be able to do that, but we hope you'll find the questions asked by others useful. And the session is being recorded, which reminds me I'm supposed to push some button here to record at my end. And we actually are planning to post the recordings on the CARP National website, and more details about that will be coming, but that's a place where you can hear it all again if you like, or let your friends know about it. So I think I'll just start with a few introductory remarks before I introduce our speakers related to this topic. And physical activity actually is something we've known for a number of decades can reduce the risk of falls. And it's in particular physical activity that improves your balance and improves your strength, like resistance training, that reduces that risk. And you're never too old. You know, the old adage of use it or lose it, that certainly rings true for our session today. People of all ages and of all abilities benefit from physical activity. And I think part of the impetus of this session is that many of us are concerned about staying safe and active this winter, especially with COVID-19. It's a challenging season at the best of times, and with COVID-19, there are more challenges there. Let me now introduce our speakers, and I think you can see them all. I'll start with Dr. Lee Vanderloo. Maybe you can wave there, Lee. Lee's research focuses on promoting more physical activity and decreasing sedentary behaviors among Canadians of all ages and abilities. She works at Participaction, and her work is aimed at equipping Canadians with the best available evidence for physical activity, helping people identify barriers and overcome those to physical activity, and helping people create an action plan for daily active living. So welcome, Lee. Our second speaker is Dr. Tilak Dutta. His work focuses on giving people the tools and knowledge they need to age successfully. His team's work focuses on preventing falls, caregiver back injuries and pressure injuries, as well as improving accessibility for people with disabilities. And Judy, Andrew Piaio. Judy has worked at Bushtaka, an Ottawa area outdoor sports retailer for over 10 years. Her current role is community support coordinator, but she started in the footwear department, very pertinent to our topic today. Judy is an outdoor enthusiast. She coaches other runners year-round in all kinds of weather, and she enjoys cycling, snowshoeing, and hiking. So thank you all very much for joining us. I'm actually going to start with a polling question, which I'm going to ask three of them, actually. I'm going to ask our audience who are on the web to answer these questions. They should be showing up on your screen. And I'm just going to give you a minute or so to answer them. The first one concerns whether or not you've ever used an app on your smartphone or a wearable device. Just use your cursor to vote. The second one is thinking about the upcoming winter months and whether or not you think your level of physical activity is likely to stay the same, increase, or decrease. And the third question is, what is the worst slip or fall you've had on ice or snow in the past 5 years? And I see people are starting to answer. I encourage all of you to enter your response there. This will give our speakers a little sense of some of your experiences and who's in our audience. And I'll just give people a few more minutes. Almost everybody has responded. Okay, so let's have a look. So there's our results. It looks like the majority have not used an app on their smartphone or a wearable device. Lee, I think you'll probably come back to that point. And then in the upcoming winter months, great to see that and about 60% of you think that your level of physical activity will stay the same, but a quarter are saying that your activity level is likely to decrease. And there we've got the data on whether or not you've had a slip or fall and what was the worst one in the last 5 years. So I would say that's pretty much on track of what we'd expect, because a third of you have had no slip or fall, but the rest of you have. And as is typical, there's a lot of slips and falls that occur without an injury, but it's the ones that cause minor and serious injuries that are really of concern to all of us. So thanks for your answers. So maybe just to get started, I'd like to ask each of our panelists a question. Could you just briefly highlight one important consideration for safe and active living in the winter months? And Lee, let me start with you, and then I'll go to Tilak and Judy. And you'll need to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I would say for me, without getting too much into it, I would probably say stay visible. I would say in terms of a lot of besides the proper footwear and everything, I would definitely say just staying visible. I think in the winter times we have a lot less sunlight, and so we have a lot of people getting out, and so just making sure you're wearing the right gear, but that you're also staying visible to drivers.
Okay.
Just to kind of keep it as safe as possible as you are kind of embarking and trying to do some outdoor activities.
Yeah, good point. With our shorter days, that's important. Tilak.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to argue today that footwear may be the simplest good winter footwear that's been proven to stick to ice is perhaps the simplest thing we can all do to stay safer.
Stick to ice rather than sliding on ice, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And Judy, and you're muted, so you just need to unmute yourself.
I would actually say dress for what you're doing. I mean, it falls into like dressing to be visible, but also wear the right clothes. Dress in layers, and so that you're warm and comfortable and can enjoy what you're doing.
Okay, that's great. So let's go on to our questions. And Lee, I'm going to start with you. And I'm being directed here just to change my view. So I'm just going to do that. There we go. So Lee, there's new physical activity guidelines that have just been released specific for seniors. What is their main take-home message? And I think you've got a couple of slides that you hoped I would share. So let me see if I can get those actually happening while you start.
So actually just in October 15th is when the new 24-hour movement guidelines were released for adults and older adults. And this is the first time, not only just in Canada, but the first time internationally that we now have integrated behavior movement guidelines. And so what's really great about that is that it does take into consideration all the different types of movement behaviors, and rather than looking at them in individual silos, starting to really consider how the whole day matters, and that how much time you spend moving is going to impact how much time or the quality of your sleep versus how much time you're spending sitting, and vice versa. And so I think it's really important when we're trying to think about, building a much more active lifestyle and spending less time being sedentary, that we take into consideration all of them. And so if we go through the slides, we can kind of go through just the specific components so that you can kind of get a clear idea to see, what is currently being recommended for optimal health for older adults.
Hopefully you're seeing these shortly. Here we go.
Perfect. So if we move on to the next slide. And so Participation was one of a few key partners that were working on this. So the guidelines themselves were released by the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists, as well as in collaboration with the Public Health Agency of Canada, Queen's University, as well as Participation. And so the guidelines, as I mentioned, really look at three main behaviors. So it'll be physical activity, sedentary behaviors, so how much time we're spending sitting or in front of screens, as well as sleep. So for physical activity, and more specific to older adults, so that's looking at 65 plus, as well as for adults, basically anyone over 18, we're really encouraging a variety of types of activities and intensities, really trying to push for around 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous aerobic physical activity. So that, over 7 days, that's about 22 minutes a day of this type of activity. And this activity is really going to be any form of movement that causes you to, breathe a little bit harder. You're maybe starting to feel a little bit warmer or sweat, and that your heart rate's going up.
So something like brisk walking.
Yes, brisk walking is a great example. If you're doing water aerobics, I know it's not so much a thing right now because of COVID, but water aerobics is another great activity. Cross-country skiing, cycling, lots of those things. Even doing gardening or housework if you're doing it with a little bit more vigor, or if you're watching over grandchildren and you're kind of chasing after them. Those are also just great examples. And keeping in mind that it doesn't have to happen all at once. So you don't have to do, an hour activity a day all in a single bout. It can be broken up to, say, 2 or 3 10-minute bouts throughout the day. And that's just as important because it's more of an accumulative effect.
Great.
In addition to the moderate to vigorous activity, we also want to ensure that we're incorporating some form of muscle and bone strengthening activities at least twice a week. So that's going to be any type of activity where we're kind of putting weight on our bones and our muscles. And so that's going to really help in terms of really stave off issues related to, balance and stuff. So building kind of those stronger muscles, particularly focusing on the larger muscle groups. And then lastly is just in terms of light activity, which also includes standing, is just, several hours a day. So just trying to incorporate a couple more steps wherever you can throughout the day. And it's really important to, remember that there's no such thing as bad activity. Some movement is better than no movement at all, and more is always better. So if you're someone who maybe isn't very active right now, or because we're getting into the colder weather, or maybe you're recovering from an injury or might have some balance or mobility issues, every little bit that you do is a step in the right direction, pun intended, but is definitely something to consider. And really, as we start to get older into those 65 plus, we really want to be focusing on some of those activities that help challenge our balance, because that's going to go quite far in terms of helping to prevent trips and falls. If we move to the next slide. So this is moving on to that second behavior, which is sedentary behavior. And so this is really looking at, we're trying to limit sedentary behaviors to 8 hours or less. And so it's important to remember that sedentary behavior sleep isn't considered sedentary behavior. So you don't have to worry about that. But sedentary behavior is really going to be any time that you're sitting or doing very little, you're expanding very little energy. So it's usually done in a sitting or a reclined position. And of course, this also takes into consideration that if you are someone who has some mobility issues, or if you are in a wheelchair, there's still lots of ways that you can help limit your time being spent sedentary. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to completely always be ambulatory using, your legs or whatever. So, there's still lots of ways that you can try to avoid excessive sedentary behavior, even if you do fall into that category. What's also new about these guidelines is that we've never had in Canada any form of screen guidelines. So how much screen viewing or how much screen time is not good? At what level or threshold do we start to see it starting to negatively impact our health? And so what we found from all the reviews that went into the creation and development of these guidelines, as well as expert consultation, is that it tends to be around that. We want to limit our screen viewing to about 3 hours a day of recreational screen time. So that's more of that screen time that we're doing for leisure. And so it's kind of exclusive or separate for the screens that we might be doing for work. So many of us are working from home, or you're spending a lot more time in front of screens, maybe for social connectivity, to connect with loved ones. So just trying to keep in mind that, there is a bit of a separation there, and that there's some screen time we obviously can't escape. But when you're thinking about your leisure recreational activities, try to limit it to about 3 hours a day. And then the other important aspect with regards to sedentary behaviors is trying to look for every opportunity that you can to break up long periods of sitting. If you're watching a show, or if a lot of us have those streaming services, if you are watching a lot of shows or a lot of movies in one single sitting, try to take some opportunities, maybe, within every 30 minutes, every 40 minutes, to even just stand, take a quick stretch break, anything just to kind of break up. So you're having that postural shift where you're going to help break up just those extended periods of sitting as much as possible. Or if you do have some sort of maybe disability or mobility issue where sitting might not necessarily be an option, there's still lots of activities in terms of manually wheeling, or even doing some stretches with parts of your upper body. Again, it's just trying to interrupt that kind of motion, that lack of motion, for lack of a better way to say it. But if we move on to the final slide, this is the final component of the guidelines, which is sleep. So it's recommended that for adults 18 to 64 years, that we try to aim for about 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep. So it's not always about quantity, but also important to focus on quality. On a regular basis, try to aim for consistent bed and wake times all throughout the week. So I know oftentimes, and I'm very guilty of this, is that I am pretty good during the week, and then as soon as Friday hits, I'm up so late, might sleep in, or maybe I'm up early the next day, but it definitely throws me for those 2 days. And then I try to get back at it for Sunday night. but it is better if we can try to be as consistent as possible. And then for adults 65 plus, we're aiming more for that 7 to 8 hours of good quality sleep per night. Again, aiming for those consistent bed and wake times. Things like keeping screens out of the bedroom is a really great way to help preserve kind of your room, your space as just a place to sleep. But we also know that increased screen viewing right before we go to bed, whether it's stuff with the blue light, or the types of activities that you're doing, the increased stimulation, it does throw off not only the quality of our sleep, but it also delays the point at which we actually fall asleep. So those are some things to keep in mind, but these are the new guidelines. So I'm happy to share them, so given that they've been so recently released.
That's great, Lee. And I guess people can get those on your Participaction website.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to our website at participaction.com, you can download.
Why don't you type that into the, you can type that into the chat.
Yes, I'll type that in. And you're also I'll put my email too. You can also contact me, and I'm more than happy to also mail you a hard physical copy. If you would prefer that, you can put it on your fridge or share that. I'm happy to do that as well. So I will put both of those into the comment box now.
So maybe just a couple more questions for you, Lee, before I turn to TLAC. One is, what kind of support Participaction offers for older adults who want to maintain or increase their level of physical activity? And I'm just remembering that poll that showed us that not that many people have used wearable devices or used an app.
Yeah, so for us at Participaction, I mean, we only recently released the app. It's coming up on almost 2 years, so it's been about 1.5 years. But up until then, everything that we do was either released digitally or in hard copies, and it was really aimed at really helping to support more active behaviors and among all Canadians, and also helping to find ways to limit sedentary behaviors where possible. And so last year in 2019, we released our first adult report card, which really was a giant kind of summary of all research that had been done in Canada, the best available research to look at, okay, how well are Canadians faring with regards to their physical activity levels, sedentary behaviors, where are they getting active, what seems to be the most common barriers for adults to get active, and what are the major sources of support. And so we really wanted to get a good idea to see how Canadians were doing. And in some areas they did well, so they were receiving high grades. In other areas they weren't. But what we did is we did take a more focused look at older adults within this report card, because we did really want to see, with the current trends in our population, with the major shift of baby boomers entering into this kind of older adult cohort, we really wanted to take a look to see, like, a lot of Canadians are in this older age group. If you're not yourself, then you might have a parent in that group. And so really looking at all the ways that we can support that, or thinking of ourselves, if we're not there yet and we are nearing, how can we kind of help support more active behaviors? And so we really dug into the evidence to look at 3 main areas. The first being falls prevention. The other one is social connection, ensuring that you're staying connected with loved ones or community members. And then the last one was around cognitive decline, so preventing cognitive decline all through physical activity. Then with the app that recently launched, this was just another way that we could get information out to Canadians and our viewers, with smartphones becoming so popular and with so many people using apps to kind of consume or to get at this information much more readily. This definitely made sense for us to go that way. However, based on this poll and also, information that we're finding, our biggest, the majority of our users definitely fall within the 40 and 50 age range, which is great. But we also know that we have a lot of older adults that, or parents of these people that are our current users that do want to get involved. And so trying to really look at some of the current barriers or what's getting in the way. How can we make this easier for older adults to get involved and use this type of technology? If it's something, of interest, but really it's important for us to be aware of these barriers, and then so that we can develop some sort of solution-oriented way to kind of address those barriers, all while, consistently having consultations with members of that particular population.
So I used your app. My son downloaded it. Thank you very much. And I actually engaged my siblings and some friends across the country in the Great Move Challenge in October. It was actually a lot of fun. But my 95-year-old mother was a bit miffed because she does not have a smartphone and she does not have any wearable device, but she really wanted to be involved. She's actually quite physically active. So in future, are you planning for some way for that a kind of person who doesn't have the app, doesn't have the wearable device, isn't going to get them, but wants to participate in these challenges? Is there a way for them to get involved?
Yeah, so that is definitely, I mean, one, that's amazing about your grandma. My Oma and Opa are also
My mother, not my
mother, sorry, your mother. Yes, your mother. That's so great. Yeah, my grandparents, my Oma and Opa are also in their early 90s, and they're also quite actively cycling. And yeah, it was also a barrier for them that they couldn't. So one of the things that we're looking at is either, obviously there's the option for someone to sign up for them and just manually enter the data for them. The other thing that we're really trying to look at is this idea of this intergenerational impact on where we can better connect, older adults with the younger generations. So again, it's kind of twofold. We get them involved in using the app, tracking their activities so they can also still reap those benefits, take part in the kind of gamification of getting active. So with our most recent challenge that you mentioned, Nancy, in terms of, everyone steps on the team, help you progress from coast to coast in this challenge. But also by doing this intergenerational, we're also kind of able to further kind of hamper down on this whole social connectivity, connecting people together. And so we're really starting to take a deeper dive and see what we can do to help make that definitely more possible, because for us, it's really important that we remove as many barriers as possible, or at the very least have some sort of feasible workaround.
So stay posted. There's more to come, and welcome ideas, I'm sure. So people have got your email address. So let me move on to TLAC, because we just don't have enough time here.
No, that's okay.
TLAC, maybe just start with why footwear is so important in fall prevention, and tell us a bit about your lab research that you've been doing on this topic.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was great. Thanks to Lee for setting this up so nicely for the type of things that we want to talk about here today. Are you able to see my slides there? Yeah. So, the way I think about it, right, with fall prevention, there's a couple of different major ways we could try to prevent people from falling. We can look at individuals. We can look at what can an individual do, and I think Lee just laid the foundation for that. Keeping active is one of the fundamental things. We could try to change the environment. We can make sure stairs are safer, handrails are safer. Snow gets cleared off sidewalks. Where I live in Toronto, they just turned down a motion here to have the city clear the sidewalks that one of the councillors brought. There's some areas of the city do get snow clearing, other areas don't. But people want to get out and stay active. These things are all interrelated, and but I want us to think about it in the perspective of where we are right now. So we've got some nice weather right now, so maybe a lot of the people that are listening to this right now are getting out, going for their walks, their brisk walk, as we talked about. But imagine what happens after we get our first snowfall, right? That week after that first big snowfall, how many people are going to go out and stay active? I think it's so easy, it's so hard to build up a good habit of staying active, and then all of a sudden the winter hits and we get some bad weather and we fall out of these habits. At least I do. I find that it's hard to keep these things up. And as Lee mentioned, maybe some people are into aquatics and we're doing these kinds of things, and then COVID came along, and either because these facilities are now closed, you can't do that, or because you don't feel comfortable being indoors with other people for the risk of COVID, it's gotten really challenging to stay active. And maybe the best way to stay active is to get outdoors now. We can all still get outside, but how do we do that safely? Well, I think it's thinking about this interface between the environment and the individual, which is the footwear. And the reason we really got into this work was it was Jeff Fernie, who's the former institute director at Toronto Rehab Institute, who had this suspicion, this hypothesis that the footwear that we buy in the stores, there's a pretty wide range of performance. And you can't tell by looking at the footwear how well it's going to work. You actually need it to be tested. In the same way that we have winter tires, we buy winter tires, and someone has designed that product and has tested it to make sure that it will work in the conditions that we need it to. And so they actually stamp a little thing, a snowflake on the side of the tire so you know it's going to work. But why can't we have something like that for footwear so that we know that that the public, the rest, we know when we're buying a pair of footwear whether it's going to work for us or not. So it's just, I'm going to show you how we do our footwear testing stuff. But before we do that, if you want, why don't you, here's the quiz portion of my presentation here. Go ahead and pick, if you're anything like me, if you're going to buy footwear, you would go into the store and you would flip over the boot and look at the sole. And, so imagine you're doing that right now, and go ahead and select which boot you think would perform the best on an icy surface. And then I'll show you how we test it, and I'll show you the results for these four boots. So you can go ahead and select that, or go ahead and type, if you want, you can type it into the chat, and we can see if everyone kind of comes up with similar.
But at least have it in your mind, right?
Or at least have it in your mind.
Before the big release.
Yeah, that's right. So here we go. So here's how we do our testing. So we're in this room we call Winter Lab. And that's actually Jeff Fernie there, who's the person that really envisioned all of this testing and developed all these laboratories that are these 6 meter by 6 meter boxes that can be mounted on a platform that can tilt. And so you can see we just tilted that platform to a 2-degree incline, and he's walking on what we call a wet ice surface. And you can see that the first boot here that he's walking on can't even go up a 1 or 2 degree incline without slipping. Let's compare that to another boot that we tested. So in this case, you can see a 5-degree incline, and we'll see how he does. So you can see he's already well outperformed that first boot. He's able to stick to ice even on a wet ice 10-degree incline. And here's a 19-degree incline. It's actually quite difficult to walk up a 20-degree slope. And you can see these boots are able to climb up this slope without any problem. And so that's the first thing we learned when we started doing this testing, is that most footwear falls under the category of pretty bad. It only is able to climb up a 2 or 3 degree angle. And then there's some footwear that can do a 20 degree angle. And so here are the results of the 4 boots that you had to choose from. So,
and I'll tell you that in the chat, most voted for B.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So, and that's interesting, which is when I do this little bit for people, that is the one that most people will pick. And the interesting thing to me is that C actually outperformed B, even though the treads look very similar. But there's a bit of yellow paint that someone chose to put on the B boot. And so we're very, shoe manufacturers and designers are pretty good at manipulating us, I would say, at showing us here's what should work well, and we're pretty gullible, unfortunately. So you can't tell by looking at a pair of footwear how well it's going to work. And you probably are surprised to see that boot D is the one that performs the best out of all of them. That's the one that was boot 2. Boot A was boot 1 that you saw in those videos. And you can see that it doesn't have any tread at all. Now, that's not a boot that you can actually buy on the market right now, but it's the material. The point is the material properties that are built into the tread are what matter. And so there's some people are actually developing a new generation of these materials that stick to ice far better than any other rubbers, the conventional materials that we've been working with until now. This one is actually a material that has little glass fibers embedded in the rubber that grab the ice. So you actually see you can't see it when you look at it under with the naked eye, but if you look at it under a microscope, you see these little glass fibers sticking out from the surface, and that's what gives us our stickiness.
So you've got a rating system now, do you, for this? I guess that's what you're going on to.
Yeah, exactly. So what we do is all the footwear we've tested, and I'm going to throw a number, I think it's in the range of 400 pairs of boots that we've tested to date. All of the results are posted on ratemytreads.com. And this is what it looks like when you go to that website and click on one of the particular boots. You'll see this MAA score, that we call it the maximum achievable angle score. And in this case, this boot scored a 10-degree score. And so we give it a recommended rating. It gets a 1, 2, or 3 snowflake rating on our website. And you can see the results, what its score was. And by score, I mean, what angle was it able to walk up before it started to slip? So you can see this one, if you're walking uphill, you had a slightly different score than if you're walking downhill, and so on. And we have something called what we call wet ice or melting ice. And we also tested on what we call bare ice. So it's like a colder ice that doesn't have a wet surface. And then so you can go on our website and look up all the footwear that we've tested and look up the best performing ones. And you know, the ones we recommend are typically the ones that score over a 7. If they score over 7 on this test, you'll see we say it's a recommended boot. But it's important to remember that we get inclines in the real world that are in excess of 7 degrees everywhere. Even though that was based on some kind of standards that are out there in the built environment, you're not really supposed to have, in theory, inclines greater than 7 degrees. You do find this. This is right outside our hospital at Toronto Rehab Institute. You can see that's almost an 11-degree incline. So that's the basis of our testing.
How durable are these boots with that? It's a good tread.
Excellent question. Yeah, so that is the big challenge. So what we've found is, unfortunately, this stuff wears out and pretty quickly. So our studies have shown now that this stuff will wear out in as little as 100,000 steps potentially. So that's something that the companies that sell these boots won't tell you, and it's actually a very risky thing because you buy these footwear based on the result on this, let's say on our website, and you think you have really good boots, and you go out in the winter in the ice, and unfortunately they do wear out. And so we've been in discussions with the companies that are doing this, and we're highlighting this problem soon on our website. We're doing more wear testing of these footwear. That's the next step.
Excellent. And maybe this is a place for some more consumer demand to these companies, so they can see that there's a market for this. Yeah. I guess an over boot that goes over a boot you've already got that doesn't rate well is in the
works. That's right. That's right. So here, I'll just show you the little idea that we have based on these two. We have 2 postdocs that have been working on this idea. We've created our own material that we now think will work better than the existing footwear, and we're working with a company to create an overshoe that we think will outperform the footwear that's out there now and last longer. And there were some questions in the question and answer thing about those overshoe spike things, and it's probably worth touching on that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute, and I know
you come back to that.
A bit to say about that.
Sure, we'll come back to that.
We cover that.
Yeah,
that's great, Tilak. It's such interesting work. Judy, let me move on to you. You've been involved in the footwear industry for quite some time. So how do you see footwear affecting seniors' involvement in outdoor physical activity in the winter months in particular?
Well, I think they need 2 things in their footwear. They need traction, obviously. The other thing they need is footwear that's going to keep their feet warm, because you're not going to go outside, you're not going to stay outside if you have cold feet. Unfortunately, they're warm your boots are. So if you buy a pair of boots that's good, kind of sporty, that's based entirely on what the manufacturer said. Am I still here? Okay.
You are, but you're breaking up a little bit, but keep going.
Okay. So it's important to have boots that are keep your feet warm, because you're not going to stay outside if you have cold feet. And I would also add to that don't invest several $100s in a pair of good warm boots and then wear them with crummy socks. It's definitely worth investing a little bit, $20, $30 in a good pair of wool socks. Wool socks have improved dramatically. They're not great big clunky things anymore, and they're going to keep your feet warm. So keeping your feet warm is it's up there as being, to be able to comfortably enjoy an outdoor experience in the winter, you're going to want to have warm feet.
Yeah, I know how cold my hands and feet get in the winter months. It's a real deterrent sometimes to being outside. So I think that's really important advice. What about, traction aids? And I think Tilak was starting to get into this, but we see a lot of crampons and other kinds of things being sold. I think you've got some slides that you wanted me to put up to show some of the options.
Thank you.
Well, let me just see if we can get these up. And you can speak to them. I'm getting better at this.
It looks great.
There we go.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the more popular kinds of traction aids that are on the market. I'm not going to get as scientific, but this is based on experience, just to give you some ideas about which kind of traction aids are like generally available and the differences between them and what I'd recommend with them. If we can go to the next slide.
Next one.
Yeah. So these are yak tracks, and you're going to see them everywhere. And I've used brand names here, but there's lots of other brands on the market using this. So what I'm more looking at is the foot pattern. So if you look at the pattern, they've got these little coils on the bottom. Generally, yak tracks are easier to get on. You can put them on in your house before you go outside, and you won't make holes in your floor. But these are super slippery on dry pavement and tile. So although they're going to help you on the ice, if you're going outside, you're not going to be on the ice the whole time. There's going to be times you're going to be on dry pavement, and these do not adhere well to dry pavement. If you want to go to the next slide. These are Ice Trekkers Diamond Grip, and again, there's different brands out there. This is what the pictures are of. These have much better traction on ice and dry pavement. So you're less likely to slip because you're not on ice. They are harder to put on, and they're also going to damage your floors. And if you go to the next one, this particular pattern is somewhat new. It's almost like little studs in the bottom of your shoes. These again will give you traction on dry pavement as well as on ice. They are hard to put on, and they are going to damage your floors as well. But if I was looking for something to put on my boots in the winter to kind of walk around town, this would probably be my first choice, is this pattern.
And Tilak, I see you nodding as well. Is that kind of consistent with your thoughts on this?
What I like about this, yeah, Judy, I agree that what I like is I think this one is one where you can see that there's some rubber also that will probably come into contact with the ground because there's so few studs. And so you're getting away from the risk, the big risk, which as Judy's already talking about here, on that some of these will actually be very slippery on hard surfaces. So that can be pavement, as she says. I think the biggest risk is when you transition indoors. So if you have someone that's putting these on, trying to get to the grocery store, or go to your doctor's appointment or something, it's an icy day, and you either can't get them off as you arrive at your destination, right? Not all of us have the ability to take these things on and off. They're going to be goopy and slushy, right? Keep that in mind. You're at real risk of slipping in that first step as you take indoors. So, I think you really want to test these on a hard, wet surface to make sure that there's some rubber that comes into contact with the ground. So it's not just hard metal on tile, for instance.
Yeah, a great input. Judy, the next
Totally
one.
agree. So then the last one I have in here, these are micro spikes, and I would never recommend these for use like around town, but if you want to go out for a walk in the woods, if you want to be out on the trails, and again, there's no way that you're going to walk around your house in this because you're going to make there'll be a track of hardwood. Your hardwood floors will have large chunks taken out of them. But these are absolutely the go-to if you're going to be these things are amazing.
Yeah,
and they would be my absolute go-to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's other manufacturers making similar ones. These just happen to be these are probably the most established microspike product on the market. They're used a lot. People use them in the summer as well, but if you're hiking in the woods, this is what 90% of the people that have this kind of equipment will be using.
That's a really helpful summary. You've got some tips for putting them on. I
do, because one of the big problems with all of these is you have to put them on and take them off. My mother and my parents are both pretty active. My mom is 82 and she walks every day. And it's a big issue for her that she needs the traction, but physically, like, these are all quite hard to get on and off your feet. Mm-hmm. So just a few ideas for making it a little bit easier. If you put a chair on the porch or by the door so you can put them on, because you want to sit down where you're putting them on. So make yourself a space where you can put these things on after you leave your house or just before you leave your house. If you got a big doormat, you can probably put a chair by the door. Remember, you got to be able to get down your front stairs too. Leave them on a second pair of boots. So if you have two pairs of boots, put the traction aids on one pair of boots and just use them when you need them. For the sake of keeping them in one piece, you need to make sure you air dry them before you put them away, because the salt on the sidewalks will make them deteriorate quickly. So make sure that you keep them dry and clean. My other suggestion is they tend to be very tight on your boots. They don't really need to be as tight as is indicated unless you plan on doing wind sprints. So buy a slightly bigger size because it'll be easier to get them on and off and to manipulate them.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you very much for that. I think what we're going to do now is turn to our questions that have come in. And Bonnie has been lurking there in the background and trying to collate them. So are there some questions for our speakers?
Good morning. Yes, I have a few questions. I'm going to jump in on the last two speakers there and want to know, are there any of these add-on spikes or some kind of traction control that you can still wear in the grocery store? Because it's fine to have a chair set up at your door, but my Loblaws doesn't have one. So what's, where I live, I can walk to the grocery store.
I don't know, Judy, if you know of any. There's a type of boot where the spikes, it's actually built into the boot itself. You can retract. There's a little thing you turn at the back of the boot, and it puts out the spikes or it pulls them back in. So something like that, you still would have to bend over. Someone else in the questions asked, what about people who can't bend over? It's not, I don't think it's a good solution. So this is for anyone who's trying to go somewhere, get to a grocery store, get to a doctor's office. I think the better solution is to buy a boot that doesn't have spikes, because you can use it safely everywhere.
So one of the participants said, I have heard that Renfrew County is providing free cleats for seniors that can be easily rotated to allow the cleats to be repositioned on top of the boot when you go into a mall. Do you know anything about these?
Yeah, I've seen these. They're sort of like, they're a strap that goes around the midfoot is the way I've seen these. And there's spikes on on that strap. And so again, you do have to reach down and touch this thing that's covered in slush. And, are you actually going to do that? Are you going to remember to do it as you're approaching? I think that's the biggest issue, right? I was involved in a trial with some personal support workers who they were given something very similar to this, and they stopped the trial because it was so dangerous. So many people fell going into people's homes that they actually had to stop the trial. They are very dangerous. I think I can't stress that enough, because we just are in our own heads. We're not thinking all the time about how to switch these things at the right times. So
the answer is this overboot that you were talking about.
Well, it doesn't exist yet, but we're trying to.
Would you please get this to market soon? And then Judy can sell them to all of us, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. This is a question that I had. When you had those 4 boots, is boot D, the very plain looking one, is that similar at all to curling shoes?
Well, to some degree, the curling shoes, the rubber is probably softer, so it sticks better to the ice for that reason. This is actually, so someone's clearly thought about the rubber compound that's gone into the curling shoe. I think these are different. These are specific. These are something a little different than that, but it is another compound, a rubber compound that sticks to ice.
Okay. Judy, do you have any of those in your store?
And you're muted, Judy.
No, we do not. Well, actually, I'm not entirely sure what the compound is, so I can't necessarily, I don't know exactly which. There are a couple of boots out on the general market that are specifically designed to adhere better to ice. Merrill has one, but I don't know if that's the same compound that you tested. Is it?
Yeah, there's basically there's basically 2 technologies that are out there right now. One is Ice Grip, or I think it's called. So Vibram creates one, and there's another one called Green Diamond. So so a whole bunch of different companies will license Vibram's technology and put them in their shoes. So Merrell makes them, Sock. You can get running shoes with this stuff in them.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot. You can go on our website and you'll see all the different boots that use it. And there's a whole bunch of different brands. And then the other one is Green Diamond. Green Diamond is actually you can see little bits of metal. They've actually have little metal filings, shavings, that have been embedded in parts of the shoe. And so those ones are really easy to see that there's something going on there. But both of them, again, wear out. So we test that. That's the fundamental problem is they'll last you maybe, depends on how much you walk. So if you're someone that only needs them to get to the grocery store and get to the doctor's office and you're not walking, 10,000 steps a day, like some people, I'm sure Lee would tell you should, to get your 150 minutes of activity in a week, you're probably walking around that, 10,000 steps a day. So you're going to wear these things out very quickly. So that it may not be appropriate for you.
So to kind of clarify, yes, the Vibram branded soles we have on a number of shoes, and they're branded as Vibram, and as you just mentioned, you can get running shoes with those on them. You can also get winter boots that have that product on it. The other product, I don't believe that we have anything that uses that.
I think as consumers start to ask questions about this of their retailer or writing off to manufacturers, it's that demand that's going to actually drive a change in this. And you made the comment, Tilak, about the motion that was voted down, if I understood you correctly, in Toronto, about snow clearing. I think that's another part of that really important interface. How do we work to try to get our municipalities actively engaged in looking at snow clearing options? I know in Ottawa this year they're starting a snow mole, like a little mole, group that you can join, and it's I think to provide feedback directly to the municipality about where snow clearing is being done well and where it's not being done well. And I think there's a lot of different activities like that that are being put in place with citizen action in municipalities to try to make sure the paths actually are clear. And I guess, Judy, to your point, there's the idea, really interesting idea of a chair that you can put on your own porch or whatever to put on cleats and whatever you choose. But what about in the parks? Do we have benches that we can sit in there as we start to hike or want to put on our snowshoes and so on? So there's things our municipalities can be doing to make it easier for us to be active, but it's our voices that are going to make that difference.
Yeah.
Bonnie, was there one last question you've got from the audience?
Well, just a comment from,
Yeah.
Actually, I've got a couple of questions for participation if we have time for that.
Sure, why don't you ask one?
Jim sent in a comment that curlers use a toe rubber, which is really great, but very expensive. I've never seen a curler fall, not that I watch curling a lot. Must be something good about their shoes. In terms of participation, Lee, your city, our city, everywhere in Ontario anyway, in-person strength and balance classes have been canceled for months and months now. Any suggestions for seniors that really need these classes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, we're seeing that because of COVID and the closures of a lot of these centers, not only is it having an impact on obviously physical activity and balance, but it's also having a huge issue in terms of adding further to this whole issue around social isolation and losing that kind of sense of connectivity and connectivity and social communication. And so what we've been trying to do, or either we lead it ourselves or we're sourcing it, is that we created at the start of COVID, and now they're all available right now through our Facebook channel. But again, if you reach out, there's probably ways that we can make it or try to make it available. But if you have Facebook yourself, or if a family member does, that can just give you access. We created a whole library of just 10 to 15 minute quick little fit breaks for activities that you can do, and it's led by a physical therapist. who works with us at Participation, and actually her background is working specifically with older adults and getting them active.
Okay.
And so these 10 to 15 minute workouts are just things that you can do at home in a small space with no equipment, or if it was equipment, it was using something like a water bottle. Or a soup can, just to add a little bit more weight and resistance, but they were all just 10 or 15 minutes long in length. So if you do fall into that group that, you can no longer attend your class out in the community because of current COVID recommendations, I would certainly recommend checking out our library of videos through Participation's Facebook page. So that's an online social media platform, or connecting with us. You connect with me via email, and I can certainly ensure that we can try to get them into your hands, but that would be a great option. There's a lot of other online platforms. I know the Y has been trying to release some videos as well. So again, you're still able to get active, still able to reap those benefits that you would get, and just trying to ensure that you can do it safely from home right now during the current pandemic.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation. But again, any type of weight-bearing exercise, just using your body weight. So thinking simple, you can do, crunches, shoulder presses, chair squat, or sit to chair squat. So just lowering yourself to sit, and then once you touch the chair, stand back up. You're working on those major muscle groups and also those stabilizing muscles. And so that's a great thing, and also is going to help with balance. So again, just trying to lower yourself slowly to a chair and stand back up. Those are some great options. Also, wall push-ups is another one. You're going to be helping to work again with those kind of upper core stabilizing muscles as well.
Yeah. I've personally used your videos, but I'm not a Facebook user. There are a fair number of people. I'm one of these seniors, right?
No, it's okay. I don't have Facebook either, so
are Facebook averse.
So there's definitely ways, if you connect, we can ensure that we try to send them to you, make them available, or, again, if a family member can just set it up so that it's always on your computer, then you can always just scroll through the library. But I also don't have Facebook, so it's one of those things of having a workaround. But certainly they're free, they're accessible, and it's easy to access through Facebook. Even if you don't have Facebook, you don't need to be on the platform in order to access them.
Okay.
Yes. I did just post in the chat function a few resources, and I've just given the example of Ottawa Public Health that actually has quite a few ideas and suggestions. So I think for those who are not from Ottawa, you might want to check out your own public health unit and see what they have.
Yep, that's a
online.
great suggestion, Nancy. Like a lot of communities, a lot of public health units, they realize that this is a major issue, particularly coming into the winter months. And so there's been a lot of great resources, a lot of great research-backed ones. So try to stick to those as much as you can. So go with a trusted source, a trusted resource, and someone that specifically focuses in on supporting, active movement, fall prevention for your particular population, whatever group you fall in. That's going to be best. It's going to be more tailored to you and your needs.
Mm-hmm. I'm conscious of the time. So Bonnie, I think we're going to have to cut the questions now, knowing that we probably had more than we could have answered. Yes, but let me just ask our speakers if each of them could help us finish off the session with one key message that you want to leave the audience with. So we'll stick to our order here, and we'll go with Lee, Tilak, and then Judy.
So my closing thought would really just be, try to move every day. Doesn't matter what type of movement, just, try to get in a couple more steps every day. Try to find unique ways to kind of add some activity. So if you're talking with, a family member on the phone, can you maybe pace around the house while you do it? Maybe not the whole time, but even a bit. So again, you're not taking away from the activity of being on the phone with a friend or a family member, but you're still finding a way to just sneak in a couple more steps. So I would say that if you can't take it outdoors for whatever reason, then that's okay. Try to find ways to move a little bit more in the house. Even dancing is a great option as well. So if you have a favorite song, put that on. So every little bit counts.
Great, thank you. And Tilak?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to drop in one last piece of information from our study. The footwear that works the best performing footwear on our website, we've now just published, will reduce your risk of falls by 80%. That's what we've done some testing a couple of winters ago with 100 personal support workers. Some of them we gave our best footwear, most of them had the Vibram compound. And then the other half wore their own footwear, and we saw a 80% reduction over 8 weeks.
That's
in their fall
incredible. We
reports.
haven't seen anything that's produced an 80% reduction in falls.
Yeah, it's like,
And
and you can now get this footwear on sale. It's, you know, you can get it probably for $100 to $150. It's really worth it.
Thank you. And Judy, you're
Sorry,
muted.
I don't have a lot to add except, you know, find what works for you and do something. And, you know, don't feel the need
You cut off after
to
don't feel
get
the
out there and stay active.
I think you're encouraging us to remain active if we can during the winter.
Stay active.
Stay active. Stay active. There's a very good concluding message, I think, for all of us. And now we've got some better ideas from Lee as to what that means. How does that translate into sedentary and active living and so on? And TLAC, you've given us a lot to think about and some really good ideas around footwear. So I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to thank our speakers very much. Really informative sessions. Judy, I know some people were interested in the tips that you had about putting on and taking off their crampons or cleats or whatever they're using. Some great advice. So if people could get in touch with you about that, maybe you want to put in the chat how they can contact you if you're willing to provide that information. Lee, I'm trying to launch the our last poll, but unable to do so. I don't know if you're able to put it up. We do have 3 more sessions in this webinar series. So the next one is actually about safer bathrooms. That's next Thursday at 10 o'clock. You can register for it on Eventbrite. There's a 3rd session which will happen a week later, also on a Thursday, which is about how do you talk to your healthcare provider about falls. And that may sound straightforward, but I think we know that a lot of people don't talk to their healthcare provider about falls. So I think that will be of interest to you. And then a final session going back to the environmental interface, which is looking at safer stairs. That will be the 4th week of November. So we hope that some of you will join those, and please pass information along to your colleagues. We've just put up another poll there, so would be very grateful if you just take a second to indicate whether or not you found this session useful. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to respond to that. Thanks again. I think you've all given us some hope that we actually can reduce our risk of falls. We hope it's triggered some ideas for all of our attendees about how you can proactively prevent falls. That's what we're all trying to do, and we wish you a very safe and active winter. So thank you, Lee, TLAC, and Judy for a very informative session.